Brian Lamb. He is the head of audio advocacy and policy at the Royal National Institute for Deaf People of the UK, and now chairs the Hearing Loss and Deafness Alliance and the Adult CI Cochlear Implant Action Group. And he's also KICA's advisor on strategy, advocacy, and public policy, and he's managing the chat room for us today. Brian, over to you.
Welcome to everyone. I'm really delighted to be here to take you through this first session. I want to start with what is the huge paradox about cochlear implants. We know from the World Hearing Report that cochlear implant is one of the most successful of all neuroprotheses developed to date. There are many, many papers showing that cochlear implant is a cost-effective technology. Yet globally, it's estimated that only 1 in 20 people who could benefit from cochlear implants have one. We know that the take-up of cochlear implants and investment in them in many high, medium, and low-income countries is low. And we know, or we think we know, that cost plays a perception in why cochlear implants are not more prevalent for those that need them. Cochlear implants are often perceived as expensive, and you can see this both in the literature and from commissioners and health policy people around the world. In privately funded systems, financial incentives for non-providers of CI waver in favour of recommending continued use of hearing aids over cochlear implants. Despite compelling clinical data, without up-to-date cost-effectiveness evidence, financial justification is challenging and may be an important barrier to CI utilisation. But we know from that same research that cochlear implants can achieve a significant savings that could finance additional implant cost. And often it's that perception of cost that is the real problem, not the real or actual cost of cochlear implants once we put that in a proper context. Evidence shows that cochlear implantation saves money. And we've had some excellent recent papers on this, one of which I'm just going to quote tonight, which shows that the total benefits of cochlear implant exceed the total cost, leading to a net benefit of implanting people with cochlear implants. For children, the effect is absolutely massive. For prelingually deaf children with bilateral CI, there was a lifetime positive outcome net benefit of €433,000. For adults and seniors with progressive profound hearing loss who had a unilateral CI, there was a total benefit of respectively €275,000, or for older people, €76,000. Based on these authors' estimates from the modelling, the increased healthcare costs due to CI were more than compensated for by the value of the health benefits and by the savings in education and productivity costs. For children and working adults, the society benefit is positive, even without taking the health benefits into account. Therefore, they concluded that cochlear implants generates an advantage for both patients and for society. These figures are repeated over and over in all the key studies done. I'm only just going to take one more to give you an illustration, but there are many more I could have quoted tonight if I'd had the time. In the World Report on Hearing, which has some really interesting new research on cost effectiveness and cost benefit, they concluded that early rehabilitation, along with the use of hearing devices, such as cochlear implants, are also cost effective, despite the large costs associated with the initial technology investments. I'll come back to the language in a minute, because it's worrying when we talk about large costs. I think we should be talking about the relatively small costs of cochlear implants, but I understand why the World Hearing Report did it at that point. But what they do conclude from their own analysis is that the estimations of actual costs in a high-income country showed a return of $2.59 international dollars for every dollar invested in cochlear implants. For low and middle income setting, the return on investment was 1.46 international dollars. And for an upper medium income setting, the return on investment ratio was 409 international dollars. So we can see from the World Hearing Report, again, that it's proven that cochlear implants actually save health systems, save society money by actually people having those implants. I also want to refer to a very interesting study done on Sweden recently. And there may be a perception that certainly in the high-income countries, everything is fine, or certainly a lot better than that experience in the low and medium-income countries. It's not always the case. I think what's particularly interesting about the Swedish study, however, is they compared unilateral cochlear implant with some other very common and not contested interventions for other issues. So they looked at the overall cost effectiveness of unilateral cochlear implants, and under the Swedish system, that came out at 140,000 in Swedish, and at a moderate cost. A knee replacement is actually more expensive and also a moderate cost. Unilateral hip replacement is much more expensive and also came out as a moderate cost. What we see is this summarized here. So things that are completely uncontentious, like knee replacements, 46,000 surgeries per year, yet for the cochlear implant, only 600 surgeries per year. And yet the cost effectiveness of the cochlear implant is better. I don't want to trade off, and my point here is not to trade off one impairment or one person's health problem against another, but just to show in health systems, why is it that the cochlear implant is seen as expensive when it has such good cost effectiveness and is often contested by health commissioners when other procedures are not. Just to make the point again, hip replacement surgery, we can see is cost effective under the Swedish system, but much more expensive. 50,000 plus surgeries a year. Cochlear implants, again, the same figure, 600. We know that cochlear implants are cost effective. The recent cochlear implants consensus review concluded exactly the same. You can all read that, so I won't. We shouldn't be surprised about this. Sue Archibald and I have been doing work since 2014, which has become the Spend to Save campaign, which we looked and did some early research into the cost of not managing hearing loss. And we did some research across Europe, which found that the cost of not managing hearing loss, firstly in the UK, was £30 billion, 37 billion euros per year in the UK. And that if we spend money on hearing loss, then we improve lives and save society money. So we found that overall, if you take just the social care costs and the medical costs of going to the doctor together and the opportunity costs of that, that came to 30 billion a year. That's not counting even the wider society costs. And you can read all that in our Spend to Save reports and in the Cochlear Implants International article we did, which gives you the underlying methodology for that. We then did some research on Europe using the same methodology. And I think what was really interesting here is across the whole of Europe, you can see that there are additional costs. Okay, so if you just click it just once more to bring up. So you can see that for Europe, the average additional cost per head impaired person is approximately £240 per annum. And the additional cost across Europe, just looking again at social care and doctors' costs, was 15.6 billion. But if you look at this, if you just click again, Kes, Denmark, which had one of the highest expenditures on providing hearing care, then had lower costs than all the other countries on other care services. Again, proving the point that money invested in hearing care actually saves money into the health system overall. So, what is it we need to do and what is the issue? We know that cochlear implants are effective. We know they're cost effective. We know, as I've shown this evening, that actually the provision of cochlear implants saves money across the health system, the social care system, wider society, makes people more productive. Those are the arguments we need to get across to health commissioners to bridge that huge gap between the number of people that could benefit and the number of people that actually have cochlear implants. I would suggest that one of the major problems is that we keep talking about cochlear implants as if they're an expensive solution. One thing happens when you do that. If the first thing I say to you is cochlear implants are expensive, but they're worth it, and here's the reasons why, the only thing you will remember, especially if you're a health commissioner, a politician, a health policy person, is that cochlear implants are expensive. We need to start flipping the whole thing on its head and talking about it costing more not to take action on hearing loss, that it costs more not to give someone a cochlear implant than to give them one. And then we will open up the space for the argument that better provision of hearing in healthcare and the take-up of CIs is the solution to costs within the health system, not the problem with costs in the health system. I hope whatever else you take from tonight, you go away and you talk about cochlear implants as if they are the cheap solution to people's health needs, not the expensive one, because everything we know proves that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. And I just want to point out that the PowerPoints that are being provided by the speakers will be available to you. In addition, we will send out the link to this recording when it's completed in a few days. And Brian, you have probably gone to the chat room and seen a question from Sandy Lackner. I will turn it over to you to cite the question and answer it.
I can't answer the specifics of that. What we saw for the countries that we did study, and I'm not sure Slovenia was in that group, was that the countries that had the highest investment in hearing care, so the highest investment in hearing aids and cochlear implants, had the lower additional costs over a number of years. And if people are interested in that paper, there's a reference to it in the PowerPoint slides, but we can also circulate a paper that was done post those papers we did, which went into some detail about why that was. The other question in there I can see from Michelle, the statement we need to change the story from costs of CI to savings is very provocative. Oh, good, I meant to be. So we also need to think of the scale as those costs and savings when looking at the family or the individual. No, I totally understand. The costs are prohibitive if you're talking about systems where the individuals have to pay and there's no state support. I would suggest in terms of those situations, what we need to be looking at is how we persuade those governments and those health commissioners to start investing and not leaving it up to individuals, because we know if it's left up to individuals, only those that really have quite a lot of money will be able to benefit by going private in those systems. What we need is for those systems to see that within their health service, they need to start investing, because actually it will save the rest of their system money. I know it's a high income country, but it's very interesting to see the way France went on this recently, where hearing aids were traditionally part of the private market, essentially, with a very little bit of state support. And a very excellent report was done there in 2016, which showed that for France, the health system would save money by giving hearing aids for nothing on the French health system. And that is essentially, with one or two caveats, what the French system has been moving to is a much more publicly funded, if not entirely free system, precisely because that research showed them it was more cost effective for the health of France to do that.